Hi everybody, welcome to Live Blogger. In this video I'll show you how to create this vertical timeline for your website. So this is how it works. We can see that on the left we have the date, and then we have each of the events over here, and when we hover over this we have this color changing for this dot, and we also have a different box shadow. And if we scroll down we can see the other events over here, and when we hover over them we can see that it gets highlighted. So you may have seen this in a lot of different websites. In this video I'll show you how to design this from scratch, and it will also be responsive. So if you view it in a mobile version, this is how it will look. We can see that the date has shifted to the top over here, and everything else is looking alright. And later we will add this to our Blogger and WordPress websites. So let's get started. I opened this empty project called Timeline in VS Code. So let's create the necessary files. We need an HTML file and also a CSS file. So let's click on this button called New File, and we'll name this file index.html, and we'll create one more file and we'll name it style.css. So let's start with the index.html file. In VS Code we have the option of just typing exclamation and pressing tab, and you get this basic code. So first of all, let's link our style.css file, and we also need to add the fonts. So let's go to Google Fonts, and the two fonts we need are Roboto and Pacifico. So let's select this font, and let's click on select the style for the regular one, and let's also select the other font, Pacifico. Alright, let's click on that, and let's add this style. Click on select this style, and here we can see the link of the font. So you can just copy this to the head section of your HTML. So let's copy this and paste it over here. Alright, now let's start with the markup. We'll include everything inside a division with the class of timeline container. So we'll create a division with the class of timeline container, and in that for each of the events we will have a division with the class of event. And let's see what are the things we need to have in the event. So we need to have the heading and also this text over here. So let me just copy this text, and first of all we'll create a heading, and in the heading we'll type the planning session. And then for the content we will have a division with the class of timeline content, and in that we'll create a paragraph and we'll just copy the text. Alright, this is our first event. Let's copy this and paste it 3 more times. Alright, let's change all the other headings. Then we have designing, testing, and deploying the website. Alright, all our heading and the content is complete. Let's right click and click on open with live server. So here we have the timeline right here. Now the next thing we'll add is the date. So if you go over here we can see we have date for each of the events. Now we'll add these dates inside the event division, and we'll just move it to the left using CSS. So inside the event let's create a division, and we'll give it a class of event date, and let's add some dates over here. So November 2, I'll just copy this and paste it everywhere. For this one we will give it November 6th. Then we have 15 and 17. Right, so our date is also complete, and now we can see that all the content inside our event are displayed over here. Now it's time for us to style it. So let's go to CSS, and first of all let's set the font family for the timeline container. So we'll type timeline container, and we'll set the font family to Roboto sans serif. Alright, next we will add a maximum width to this. So we'll give it a maximum width of 500 pixels, and we'll also set it to the center. So we'll type margin 0 auto, so it'll be centered. Now if you go to the original design we can see that on the left we have this line. So for that we'll be using a border left. So here we will type border left, and we will give it 4 pixels of solid dark gray color. And we also need to add some padding to the left. So let's type padding left, and we'll set a padding of 25 pixels. Right, that looks fine. Right, the next thing we'll style is the h2. So we'll type timeline container h2, and first of all, let's give it a font family of Pacifico and cursive, and we'll set the font size to 32 pixels, and we have some margin over here on the top, so we'll set the margin to 0, and we'll also set the color of the text to 00272B, and then we also need to have this underline. So for that we'll be using border bottom. So we'll type border bottom of 1 pixel solid light gray. Now let's style the event divisions. So inside timeline container we have different divisions with the class of event. So let's target that timeline container event, and for the events we will give a box shadow, and we'll set the box shadow to 0 pixels, 3 pixels, 6 pixels, -2 pixels, and RGBA 0, 0, 0 and 0.2. Now let's set a padding of 32 pixels, and we'll also add a margin. So we'll have a margin of 48 pixels for top and bottom, and 0 for left and right. And we'll also set the line height, and we'll set it to 2. And when we hover over this, we want to have the pointer, so we'll set the cursor to pointer. So now when we hover over this, we have a different cursor. Now let's design this dot that we have over here. So for this we will use a before selector. Using before and after selectors, you can add extra content to your elements using CSS. So let's type timeline container event : before. And when you're using before, you need to compulsorily have the content property. So let's add the content property. I'll just add something over here and show you. So we can see when we typed hi, it is displayed before every event division. So in this way we can add extra data to our division. Now we'll just remove this hi from here, and we'll just add a dot here on the left. So for that, let's go ahead and set the width and the height. So we'll set the width and the height to 14 pixels, and then we'll set a border of 2 pixel solid black. Now we need to set the position of this relative to this event division. So for that, let's go to the event, and here we'll type position relative, and then here we'll set the position to absolute, and let's set the left to -36 pixels, and we'll also set a border radius of 50% so that it will have a round shape, and we need to set this to the center of the event. So here we can see it is in the center. So for that we will set the top position to 50%, and now it is starting from the 50%, so we have to move it a little upward. So for that we can type transform translate y, and we'll set it to 50% of the before element, and now we can see it is centered perfectly. Let's also set the background color to white. Alright, that's it with the before selector. Now when we hover over this, we need to have a different box shadow, and we also need to change the color of this dot. So let's type timeline container event : hover, and we'll set the box shadow to 1 pixel, 6 pixels, 16 pixels, -1 pixel, RGBA 0, 0, 0 and 0.1. So we can see that we have a different box shadow for the hover. We'll also add a transition so that we will have a smooth transition between both the states. So for the event we will type transition of all to 500 milliseconds. So now if we hover over this, we can see we have a smooth transition. Now when we hover over this, we also want to change the color of this dot. So let's type timeline container dot event : hover : before. So when you hover over this, we want to have the styles for the before. So just set the background color to red, and we can see that the color is changing. We also need to have a transition for the before. So you will type transition all to 500 milliseconds. Right now let's test it out, and we can see that it is working all right. So it is working for all the events right here. Right now the last thing we need to do is move this date to the left over here. So let's go ahead and style that. So we'll type timeline container dot event date, and we'll set the position to absolute, and we'll set the left to negative 95 pixels. So you can set these positions according to your needs. I just tested it earlier and I found that this value suits better for this design. And we'll set the top position to 50%, and also translate y to negative 50%, just like we did for the dot. And now it is perfectly in the center. We'll also set the font weight to bold. And that's basically it with the vertical timeline of our desktop version. So we can see that everything is looking alright. Now we'll also add responsiveness to this design. So if the window of our browser is less than 700 pixels, then all the styles over here will be applied. So we'll type timeline container. Let's also set the size of the window, and here we'll set the max width to 100%, because earlier we had set the max width to 500 pixels. It was a fixed width, so here we will make it flexible and we'll set the max width to 100%. And we'll also add margin left, because we can see that the line over here is at the edge. So we'll set a margin left of 8 pixels. And lastly, we also need to have the date over here on the top. It is right now outside our screen. So let's type timeline container event date, and we'll set the position to static. And we can see that it is right now at the top. We'll also add some negative margin over here at the bottom, so that the heading will go up a little bit. So we'll type margin bottom, and we'll set the margin to negative 20 pixels. And now we can see that everything is working all right, even in the mobile version. So that's basically it for this video. We have designed a vertical timeline for a website, and in the next video I'll show you how to add this to your Blogger and your WordPress websites. So that's basically it for this video. If you have any doubts, you can ask in the comments below, and if you like this video, please click on the like button and subscribe to this channel to get the latest video updates. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a nice day.